That'll be $500 for the boot removal, plus $200 for the violation, Mr. Reynolds, cash or credit, your choice. And just like that, some smug little voice on the phone informed me that a stranger had chained a boot to my truck inside my own garage. Yeah, that happened. I stood there in my work boots on the cool concrete, staring at that ugly canary yellow clamp locked onto the front tire of my restored 1978 Ford F-150, and I remember thinking, there is no way in hell this is real life. Now let me back up a sec. My name's Mark Reynolds, and I retired after 25 years with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. I bought that house in Creekwood Estates 6 months before all this started, thinking retirement was finally going to mean peace and quiet. A little workshop in the garage, coffee on the porch, maybe spending more time tuning up my truck, the one I rebuilt bolt by bolt with my own 2 hands. That truck wasn't junk, wasn't commercial, wasn't abandoned. It was cleaner than half the SUVs in that neighborhood. And there it sat, fully inside my closed garage, with a boot on it like I'd parked it illegally in downtown Chicago. The notice stuck to my windshield looked like it had been slapped on by someone who enjoyed ruining other people's mornings. Violation 047. Unauthorized storage of commercial/junk vehicle. Fine $200. Immobilization fee $500. Authorized by Creekwood Estates, HOA President Karen Miller. I read it twice, then a third time, because sometimes your brain needs a minute to catch up when something is that ridiculous. A boot. On my truck. On my property. Authorized by a woman whose entire personality, as far as I could tell, was built out of beige cardigans, fake smiles, and abuse of procedural authority. And that was the moment this stopped being a homeowner dispute and turned into a campaign. I hung up on the management company without another word and grabbed my camera. Documentation first, anger second. That's how you survive anything worth surviving. I photographed everything: the boot, the tire, the lock, the truck, the garage floor, the shut garage door, the notice, every line of print, every angle that proved my vehicle was sitting exactly where it had every legal right to be. I even shot a slow video around the whole scene, narrating the date, time, and address like I was building an evidence file for a courtroom, because honestly, that's exactly what I was doing. Once I had the photos backed up in 3 places, cloud, external drive, flash drive on my keychain, I pulled out the HOA binder they'd handed me at closing. You know that giant stack of papers everybody pretends to read? Yeah, well, I read it. All of it. Cover to cover. 6 hours at my dining table with a legal pad, black coffee, and the kind of focus that used to get me through infrastructure audits worth more money than Karen Miller could probably spell. And what I found made me laugh out loud, not because it was funny, but because it was so damn stupid. The rule they were leaning on said no commercial, junk, or disrepaired vehicles could be parked or stored in the community unless fully enclosed in a garage. My truck wasn't commercial. It wasn't junk. It wasn't in disrepair. And most importantly, it was fully enclosed in a garage. Their own rules cleared me. But there was more. Another section said the association could enter a lot to address emergency repairs or covenant violations only if the owner had been given 48 hours written notice. I got no notice. No letter, no email, no note on the door, nothing. And nowhere in those bylaws did it give the HOA or the management company the authority to immobilize a resident's vehicle. They could fine, they could gripe, they could threaten a lien if they really wanted to drag things out, but booting a truck? They had invented that power out of thin air. That's when my anger changed shape. It stopped being hot and became cold precise. Because a mistake is one thing. This wasn't a mistake. This was a system. Somebody had decided the residents in Creekwood were soft targets, and Karen Miller was the smiling face of the racket. So I wrote them a letter. Not an emotional letter. Not some wild rant. A clean, surgical, professional demand. I cited the bylaws, the notice requirement, the lack of authority to boot a vehicle, state trespass law, property law, all of it. I demanded immediate removal of the boot, voiding of all fines and fees, and a written apology. Gave them 24 hours. Sent copies by certified mail to the HOA and the management company, then hand-delivered one straight to Karen's front door. Karen lived in the biggest house in the subdivision, of course she did. Corner lot. Lawn trimmed so perfectly it looked vacuum-sealed. I rang the bell, and she answered through one of those brass security chains, like I was some kind of threat to civilization. Late 50s, pink velour tracksuit, coffee mug in hand, expression like she'd been personally appointed empress of suburban order. I held up an 8x10 photo of the boot on my truck. Karen Miller? I asked. Her eyes flicked to the picture, and she smirked. Smirked. Ah, Mr. Reynolds. The F-150. Yes, we've had our eye on that vehicle. You know what I mean? There are people who say things so absurd, so confidently, that for half a second you wonder if you slipped into another dimension. I pushed the letter through the crack in the door. Told her actions amounted to trespass and illegal seizure of property. Told her the liability started with her name on that notice. And then I walked away before she could start performing. 48 hours later, the answer came from Prestige Community Management on fancy embossed letterhead. They claimed my truck had been visible when the garage door was open and was therefore subject to enforcement. They accused me of harassing Karen by delivering the letter in person. Then they rejected everything and added another $100 fine for non-compliance. Total due, $800. Failure to pay would result in a lien on my home. That was their mistake. Because once they sent that letter, this wasn't just a ridiculous neighborhood feud anymore. It was documented bad faith. Threats. Escalation. A pattern. So I started knocking on doors. My first stop was the Hendersons, a young couple down the street with 2 little kids. Brian was outside fighting with his lawnmower, and when I casually asked how things were going with the HOA, the man gave me a look like I'd asked about a prison warden. Said they got fined because their daughter's pink Barbie Jeep sat visible from the street for 3 hours. $25. They paid it just to avoid trouble. Then came Mrs. Gable, an 80-something widow with trembling hands and prize-winning rose bushes Karen had forced her to rip out because they were the wrong, approved species. Mrs. Gable cried telling me about it. Then the Sanchez family, threatened over the stained color on a backyard swing set. Then a disabled veteran who got hassled over a wheelchair ramp he needed to get into his own house. Story after story, same theme, petty rule, inflated fine, quiet intimidation. Everybody paid because everybody thought they were alone. That was the twist, right there. I thought I was fighting for my truck. Turns out I'd stumbled into a neighborhood full of people who'd been getting squeezed for years. And then I met Dave Sterling, retired lawyer, former JAG, lived 3 streets over. Lean guy, sharp eyes, the kind of handshake that tells you he's already made 3 accurate judgments about you before you sit down. I laid everything out on his kitchen table, photos, letters, bylaws, neighbor complaints. He listened, then leaned back and said, "Mark, this isn't just an HOA run amok. This is a criminal revenue model wearing a polo shirt." That man became the best ally I could have asked for. Dave said suing them directly would be slow and expensive. Better play. Go after the head of the snake, the management company's license. He laid out a 2-part strategy, so clean it was beautiful. First, I pay the $800 under protest with a credit card. That way, once they accepted the money, the extortion wasn't hypothetical anymore. It was complete, documented financial harm. Second, we check whether the booting company they hired was even licensed. I thought he was crazy for the payment part, but he was right. So I called Prestige, paid the money under protest, got my emailed receipt, and waited. Next morning, a sullen guy in a greasy jumpsuit rolled up in an unmarked tow truck, unlocked the boot without saying a word, tossed it in the truck, and left. I filmed the whole thing. Then I inspected my wheel and found a deep scratch in the finish. More evidence. Dave checked county records, and sure enough, the booting company, Quick Boot Recovery, had no vehicle immobilization license. Not even close. They were operating illegally. From there, the whole thing turned into paperwork warfare, and that, my friends, was where Karen had wandered into the wrong man's battlefield. We filed a comprehensive complaint with the state business and professional regulator against Prestige. My case, the boot, the illegal entry, the missing notice, the bad faith fines, the retaliatory letter, the payment receipt, everything. Then we added the neighbor cases to show a pattern of systemic abuse. Separate complaint went to the county on Quick Boot for unlicensed activity, trespass, vandalism, and potential extortion. But we didn't stop there. Because systems like that survive by keeping people isolated, so we broke the isolation. I built a website, simple, clean, factual. Posted summaries of the bylaws in plain English, anonymous stories from residents, and downloadable complaint forms with step-by-step instructions. Then I spent one moonless Tuesday night walking nearly 500 homes, slipping flyers under welcome mats with a QR code and one simple question. Tired of HOA fines and harassment? By the next day, my inbox looked like a confession booth had exploded. Dozens of residents came forward. Holiday decoration fines, driveway stains, lawn warnings, threat letters, ramp violations, garden gnome citations. Yeah, garden gnomes. Karen had apparently declared one of Mrs. Gable's cheerful little ceramic gnomes an aesthetic blight. You can't make people like that up. Life does it for you. Within 2 weeks, more than 30 additional complaints had been filed against Prestige, all from Creekwood Estates. And then Karen panicked. Prestige blasted out an email warning residents about malicious misinformation by a disgruntled homeowner and threatening legal action. We posted that too. It backfired so hard it practically became our recruitment poster. Then the outside world started moving. A detective from the county called to confirm QuickBoot was under formal investigation for operating illegally. A week later, the state opened an official investigation into Prestige because of the volume and seriousness of the complaints. Suddenly Karen's little kingdom wasn't just dealing with me anymore. Now she had regulators, investigators, and a neighborhood full of residents who had finally stopped whispering. The annual HOA meeting rolled around 3 weeks later, and instead of 20 bored homeowners nodding through Karen's script, more than 200 people packed the clubhouse. Folks lined the walls, spilled into the hallway, stood shoulder to shoulder with folders in hand like they were showing up for Judgment Day. Karen sat up front with her 2 silent bored shadows and some nervous little Prestige representative named Barry, who looked like he regretted every life choice that brought him into that room. Karen tried to start with her usual nonsense about property values and beautification, and Dave cut in with a point of order straight from the bylaws. She hated that. You could see it on her face. The open forum got forced onto the agenda, and that was all we needed. I stood up and said, I don't have a concern. I have an evidence presentation. You could have heard a paperclip drop. I walked to the front, handed folders to the board, then laid it all out. The boot in my garage, the lack of notice, the illegal fees, the neighbor stories, the pattern of abuse, the investigations now underway. Dave followed by holding up proof that Prestige was under formal state investigation. Then I added the county investigation into the unlicensed booting company. Barry went pale. Karen turned the color of spoiled plum jelly. The room erupted. Questions flew. People started standing up one after another, telling their own stories, some angry, some shaking, some near tears. Karen banged her little gavel like she thought a wooden hammer was going to restore the illusion of control. Then Dave stood, held up the recall petition, and announced we already had signatures from over 30% of the neighborhood. When he called for the vote, hands shot up everywhere. Nearly unanimous. And just like that, Karen Miller's empire died under fluorescent lighting in a community clubhouse that smelled faintly of stale coffee and carpet cleaner. The board was recalled. Karen resigned. Her sidekicks went with her. An interim board was elected on the spot, with Dave voted in as president. Prestige got terminated immediately. The vindictive special assessment Karen had just tried to push through got voided, along with a mountain of bogus fines from the last 2 years. Then came the real finish. QuickBoot's owner got charged, pleaded out, paid heavily, and lost his business. A few months later, the state investigation into Prestige concluded with a report so brutal it might as well have been written with a flamethrower. Predatory practices, bad faith, systemic abuse. Creekwood became the centerpiece example. Their license to operate in the entire state got revoked. Fined into oblivion. Finished. As for Karen, 6 months later there was a for sale sign in front of her immaculate beige fortress. I saw her one last time while I was in my driveway waxing the fender of my F-150, garage door wide open, sun pouring in like the whole universe was enjoying the joke. Her car was packed with boxes. She glanced over, saw me, saw the truck, saw that wide open garage, then looked away and drove off without a word. A few minutes later Mrs. Gable walked over with a slice of apple pie, and right there behind her, standing proud among her replanted roses, was that little red-hatted garden gnome Karen once tried to outlaw. Kids were laughing down the street, somebody was grilling, the whole neighborhood felt lighter somehow, like a pressure valve had finally burst. And I'll tell you this, that slice of pie, standing beside that truck, watching that tyrant disappear down Oak Drive, it tasted better than victory usually does. So here's the question that still sticks with me when power gets petty and hides behind rules. Is staying quiet the same thing as helping it grow? And how many people get bullied every day just because nobody wants the hassle of fighting back? Tell me what you think in the comments. Was this justice, revenge, or just a man refusing to be pushed around in his own garage? And if you've ever dealt with an HOA, a power-tripping official, or somebody who mistook authority for ownership, Share your story too, because sometimes the only thing that stops a bad system is one person deciding, nope, not this time.